Have you ever wondered what Star Wars was like before The Phantom Menace? The Acolyte is going to kick things off for us, taking us on a journey into uncharted territory with the first 2 episodes. Let's explore whether this new Star Wars series is living up to the hype and if it's worth your next binge watching session. My name is Matthew Sava with Binge Watcher. Now let's jump right into the video. Star Wars The Acolyte is a new Disney Plus series set in the final days of the High Republic era, which is roughly a century and a half before the events of The Phantom Menace. The series explores the emergence of the dark side and follows former Padawan who reunites with her Jedi Master to investigate a series of crimes. As they progress, they uncover sinister forces hinting at the rising threat of the Sith. Let's kick things off by diving into the plot and storyline. So, what can you expect from the first 2 episodes? Let's start by examining the coherence and clarity of the plot. How well does The Acolyte lay out its story? And is it easy to follow? For me, I think the plot has been set up well in the first 2 episodes. I think that they've done a good job in trying to not give too much away, but also try and build quite nicely. And I think actually it's come out in quite an organic way. And it's actually worked for them. Now, in the plot, they've clearly tried to bridge back some of the old Star Wars. And I think they've done it in quite a good way. When I say bridging back, I mean that they have tried to take feedback from the Kenobi series, because we all know that that was a little bit of a disaster. But they've tried to bring back the George Lucas era and apply it into this Acolyte series. I also thought that there was a little bit of a New Hope kind of vibe. The very, very first Star Wars with Luke, with the opening scene. And if you watch it, you'll know what I mean. And I'm not going to give a spoiler away. I just think when you watch it, like that was the first thing that pops into my mind. I also think that the plot build was really good. It doesn't give too much away. It uses sort of like a staircased approach to how it's going to bring the audience forward with them. They don't give enough, but they don't give too little, is what I'm trying to say. You know, they build the characters, they build the plot, they build everything at a steady pace. So they're adding an element of patience towards what they're trying to do. What I will say is there is one part that I got totally confused on. Now, without spoilers, there's a jump scene to something completely different. Right? So they've gone from one element to a completely different element. And I'm sort of sitting there thinking, wait, what? Sort of thing. Like, you don't actually know. And you're sort of sitting there scratching your head at one point. But then they sort of bridge it back together. It makes sense. And you latch on to what is going on. You know? So I think that they did that quite well. They didn't do what, you know, like a movie such as The Kitchen does, where it sort of raises questions, doesn't really answer them, might answer 1 or 2, but leaves you with a ton of questions. So they've done that quite well in that if they have left any opening, they do close the gap and they close it in an organic way. And I think that's really good of them. What really did strike me actually was there's definitely something going on with Disney. Now, Disney are trying to listen to the fans. What do I mean by that? I mean that the fans have been crying out for a series like this where they're going all the way back before The Phantom Menace for ages. And I think now they're finally starting to do that. But is it too late? The fans and the critics are very divided. That's always been throughout Star Wars. And right now, I think because of the mess of Kenobi. Now, the Kenobi series, do you like it because you have an attachment to Anakin and Obi-Wan and the actors that play them? Or do you genuinely like it? I mean, for me, I thought it was quite slow. I thought there were many different characteristics into the Kenobi series. Coming back to my point is that this new era of Star Wars and the Acolyte is something where Disney are sort of holding out an olive branch to say, we hear you, and I think they have, but has the damage been too much? And they need to be very careful about the rest of the episodes in this series because they don't want to have it too slow. Right now, they're safe. I think they've built very well, but now they have to push on that one step further now. and keep a level of consistency. Now for me, this section, Coherence and Clarity, out of 5 for the Binge Watcher score, I'm going to give it a 4. Now moving on, let's talk about the originality and engagement of the storyline. Does The Acolyte bring something new to the Star Wars universe, and does it keep you hooked from start to finish? So for me, it's striking a balance between what's fresh and new, but also making up for past mistakes. And if you really wanted to go a little step further into that, they've brought elements of our past Star Wars, which would be the future Star Wars, to resonate with the fans. If we start with fresh and new, 1, we're diving into the High Republic era. 2, we're seeing the Jedi in their prime, their ultimate state. And when I say that, I mean we're seeing the religion of the Jedi at its absolute prime and purest, where there's a lot of hierarchy, there's a large quantity of them, and there's a lot of structure and how they operate. Now, interestingly, what I mean by when I say making up for the past mistakes, I mean what I touched on with the likes of the Kenobi series. Now, the fans are going to be divided, of course, across a lot of different Star Wars movies and series. But the Kenobi series was a bit of a letdown because you'd waited for that for a long time, and they finally gave it to you and they completely underdelivered. It's the 2 pinnacle relationships, or people rather, within Star Wars that we've all followed and known for a long time that have been let down. But this is an opportunity, like I said before, for Star Wars and Disney to make up for those disasters, inconsistencies, and really deliver, because this is something that the fans have wanted for a while. And thank God that they have actually finally listened. But now it's all in the execution. And when I keep mentioning the Kenobi series, there's 2 reasons why I keep mentioning it and why this High Republic era of the Acolyte is so important. 2 reasons. 1 is because the battle scenes, they completely destroyed it. I mean, the lightsabers looked like they were like the toys that you buy from the shop. And the other piece is the scenes that they cut out. And I know for a fact that they cut out the Qui-Gon Jinn scene. This element of Star Wars, this timeline specifically, was where Obi-Wan Kenobi was meant to be learning a new element of the Force. And they've cut that completely. I mean, we see him at the end, but it's completely gone. Now, because of those mess-ups and mistakes and inconsistencies, that is why this is so important. It is a pivotal moment in Star Wars. And I think that so far, they have got it right. They have, but they need to build. And it is vitally important that these next episode 3 and 4 meets the fans' expectations. Now, the next point I want to make about the first 2 episodes in this series is, did it hook me? Now, it did hook me, but I need a little bit more. The reason it didn't take full advantage of hooking me or potentially others is because there were hardly any fight scenes with lightsabers. Now, I can think of 1. But for Star Wars, I mean, each episode's 45 minutes and you get 1 8-minute fight scene with lightsabers, and it was a lightsaber out being used. It wasn't actually, what we associate lightsaber battles to be. So that is really lacking, and that, for me, I need to see that in episode 3. So I'll be really let down if I don't see it. The cool thing about this series so far is that whenever I sort of feel like it's going to go off track a little bit, like what I mentioned before about there was a specific scene and then it cut straight into the next scene and it was a little bit confusing. The good thing about this so far is that whenever that's sort of happening, it brings it back and it answers that, which is quite nice. And I think they've done well with that, to make sure that they're keeping the audience with them on that journey as they explore this era. So for the originality and engagement section, the binge watching score is going to be 6 out of 10. Now let's address any potential plot holes, inconsistencies, and intriguing questions. Are there any moments that don't quite add up or leave you scratching your head? Now for me, there was one moment in the first episode, and I've already alluded to it, but it's the sort of wait what situation where they cut from one scene after the opening scene and they take you straight into another scene, and it's sort of like this doesn't add up. I just watched that, then I'm watching this, and it almost makes you think, have I like fast forwarded, or so it's a little bit of a head scratcher, but they cover that and bring it back so the audience doesn't feel lost anymore, which is good. So for me, it's okay that they did that. Sort of keeps you awake, if anything, but they did bring it back, which was good. And the only other thing that I couldn't really say confusing, but if I have to be really picky, is the history of what's happened. But that's sort of what the plot is built on. Plot being that the action taken is that May is hunting Jedi Masters, but something has happened before this that we're going to slowly be drip fed into as we progress through the episodes in the series. So it's me being picky, really, but that obviously needs to be covered off as we move and progress through the series. The next point is to do with a particular character. I'm trying to find a way of not spoiling it. The best way I can think of is that there is a specific character that I was quite excited about, and that individual character, and just to make it clear, in the trailer it specifically says that a Jedi has been killed, so it's not really a spoiler, but that individual was killed off. So it's sort of like a Game of Thrones type of feel, no one's really safe. So it was a bit of a surprise, but a good surprise. I mean, I liked Game of Thrones. I like how this is sort of progressing, a little bit of a different type of Star Wars. I think the next point I'm going to sort of make around this is the lingering questions. Now, there are three for me. Now, one is to do with the situation that's happened that we don't know about. So what's the situation when it comes to May, Osha, Jedi Master Soul, and the rest of the Jedi Masters? Why are the Jedi being hunted? And who is the Sith Lord behind the mask? Now, these lingering questions are not, I've watched the series in its entirety and I'm disappointed. I'm highlighting these with the hopes that they are going to close the loop, which if they follow the suit of the first two episodes, they will. But if I recap, there's still a lot more that can be done and that needs to be done. But I hope that this has been done on purpose so that they can build it out as they go through the episodes remaining within the series. So for the plot holes, inconsistencies, and lingering questions section, this is going to get a binge watching score out of 10, 7. Finally, here's my overall opinion on the plot and storyline of The Acolyte. And the question that we really need to be asking ourselves is, do these first two episodes set up the series for success? I think it needs to be landing the rest of the way in the right way. So it's landed well, I think, for the first two episodes. There's a couple of elements that I would question, but I think that for the remaining episodes, they need to land in the right way. And when I say landing in the right way, the audience needs to be brought into the fold with uncovering the history that's taken place and why the Jedi Masters are being hunted. And when they divulge that information, sharing the series of events that have led up to the action and objective being taken in the pursuit of killing off the select Jedi Masters. And for me, I'd personally like to see integrated flashbacks within the episodes of the series. Another point to make around this would be it's a new and fresh story and series that is combined with elements of the past, our past, future for Star Wars. And what I mean by that is we've got a fresh new outlook on Star Wars. We're witnessing it. But I think the cool thing about it is that they're bringing in elements that we've seen before. The main one for me, and I've read a lot online about this, the relationship between Obi-Wan and Anakin sort of starting to feed in that familiarity when it comes to May and Osha. And I think it's really cool to see. I mean, even when you go as far into, like in The Phantom Menace, for example, you see in Naboo, the type of buildings, the prisons in there is the same in the High Republic era that we're watching in The Acolyte, which is really cool. They're making those links. Now, the flip side of the coin here would be, for me, that there is real lacking in lightsaber battles in these first two episodes. And we're at a pivotal point now where we're going to see episode 3 next week. And there, for me, has to be lightsaber battles. They cannot leave it all the way until the last few episodes or, final 3 episodes where they're now starting to bring lightsaber battles into the fold. That can't happen. The final point on this for me is that they need to be very careful in managing how they answer the lingering questions. But I'm positive about it. If they take the same steer that they've taken for episode 1 and 2 into the remaining episodes of the series, then I'm sure it'll be fine. So I'm not worried, but they need to get it right. For their sake, for the audience sake, they have to. So in total, for the plot and storyline section, adding all of the scoring up, out of 25, this section is going to get a score of 17 out of 25 for the binge watching score. But let me know your thoughts down in the comments section. Make sure to smash a like if you enjoy and subscribe to the channel if you're new. Now that we've covered the storyline, let's talk about the characters. Who stands out and what do they bring to this new Star Wars adventure? Starting with the depth and realism of the characters. How well are they crafted in the new Star Wars series, The Acolyte? So for me, the standout performers have to be May, Osha and Jedi Master Soul. So May and her motivations are pretty clear, that she's on the hunt for the Jedi, specifically the Jedi Masters. But the thing around this is that we don't actually know what her reasoning behind it is. And that brings us back to the connection into the plot and storyline that should unfold as we move through the episodes of the series. Now, Osha's an interesting one because she is ex-Jedi. So... And the connection in between Osha and the Jedi is that she was the Padawan before she left. And then you've got her motivations for leaving that are not yet... They're clear, but they're not fully unveiled into what the audience need to know at this stage. So Disney have kept it quite closed doors in terms of why she's actually left the Jedi, but hopefully that starts to uncover and we'll get closer to that character. But the foundations are set there, so it's a good segue. They've done well, they've laid the groundwork, and it will take shape. Soul is an interesting one as well. He is a powerful Jedi Master, at least that's how it comes across in the first 2 episodes. Well respected within the Jedi. But the thing that is quite interesting for me is his relationship with Osha and how it builds quite nicely, and not too fast, but in a organic way. So the relationship between the two, they haven't seen each other for a long time, they're coming back together in this episode 1, feeding into episode 2. But what's interesting is it builds quite organically. It's not forced, that relationship, in an obvious way to us as the audience. When you haven't seen someone for a very long time, maybe a close friend, they then come back into the fold in your life and you're feeling each other out, what the do's and don'ts, or you're just trying to suss each other out. And that is portrayed really nicely in this. I even thought, watching it, I was thinking, oh, it's going to be really forced and just cliche. But actually it was done in a very realistic way that you would sort of expect of those people that haven't seen each other for a long time. The one for me that's very, very subtle is this new Sith Lord. Now, we don't know anything about him. All we know is he wears a mask, he's cloaked, got a red lightsaber, like you see in the trailer and the advertisement, right? When I was doing some research, I noticed that some people had questioned, is this the first night of Ren? And I even put a poll out on Twitter giving a couple of options as to who it could be. Where they landed, the majority of the votes, it was thought to be a Jedi Knight turned evil. But you literally have no idea. So, even someone online had written that they think it's going to be Keanu Reeves that's going to make either a short appearance or he's going to make a really big appearance. I don't know. But it's a really cool one to watch. Who could it be? But overall for the characters, I think they've introduced them across the two episodes really nicely. They've not given too much away, but they've not given too little. They've just given the right amount. For the depth and realism section, this score is going to get 3 out of 5 from Binge Watcher. Next up, let's examine character evolution. Do we see significant growth and changes in the characters as the story progresses? Now, my first point on this is that there's been foundational character growth, and there definitely needs to be more to come. So trying to answer this question is going to be a little bit tricky, as there really isn't much at this stage. But starting with Osha, us as the audience are brought into her world, and coming across Lost, she's allowing life to sort of tick by for reasons that start to uncover as you go through episodes 1 and 2. But there is a barrier for her to sort of take the shackles off and become what she's meant to be. It's interesting to see that unpack, but over the course of the series, you can bet your bottom dollar that she will then start to reconnect with her Jedi roots to then go on and become the Jedi that she's meant to be. Again, it's a prediction, but let's see how it goes. I think it could go in that direction. It always does, the whole Luke Skywalker sort of saga, right? He didn't know, slightly different story, but he didn't know. Then he sort of, over the 4th, 5th, 6th, he builds on his training to become a Jedi. And it sort of ties back with Osha, the threads between Star Wars movies or TV shows that have gone by that we've seen. And it's a nice thread. Right, we're seeing symmetry between these episodes and movies from The Acolyte. What I also like about Osha's character is that how the plot is developing at a certain pace, her character is also developing at the same sort of pace. And I think the same could be applied to all of them, to be fair. You've got little crumbs that are sort of being shared with the audience as you move through episode 1 and 2 for sure. So it'll be interesting to see when we get through the rest of the episodes how that sort of develops. Does it sort of stay the same? Does it change? But as more starts to come out through the crumbs that we get, you start to see a little bit of a shift in the evolution of her character, which is little pieces of anger. And the one standoff scene, sort of, it finally comes out. And then it's sort of disappointment for her. So it'll be interesting to see how that then plays out in the episode 3. Now, May stays pretty consistent throughout, right? She is on a mission, she's got an objective, she's going to see it through. And she's doing pretty well so far. So her character, I think, again, there is a standoff scene for her. She sort of has the opposite effect that Osha had, which is instead of her constantly being filled with anger and there being a consistency of evil surrounding her, there's like a glimpse of light that comes in and is shown, and then it sort of goes away. But it's interesting, right? Like, she's not fully converted to the dark side, I don't think. She's got characteristics of the dark side that are definitely showing, but she still has hope to being converted back. And it will be a very interesting twist to see what happens and how this story unfolds with that character. Sol is a really interesting character as well. He comes across very much how the Jedi, or I would think the Jedi, how they've always been sort of portrayed, all-knowing, all-powerful, all-wise, and for good. He embodies all of those elements. Typical stereotypical Jedi Master. And it's emphasised in this era. Whatever happened in the past between the Jedi Masters, himself, May and Osha, he has got a sense of pride that he knows. And that pride starts to shift when he comes to a realisation. But instead of letting any emotion come into it, he stays very focused with not acknowledging that he's wrong, but straight into action, right, okay, what are we going to do about it, sort of thing. He actually reminds me a lot of Qui-Gon. And hear me out on this. Qui-Gon, I wouldn't go as far to say he was rogue, but he definitely had opinions against actions and decisions that were taken by the Jedi Order and the Council. He being Sol, Jedi Master Sol, also shows elements of frustration when it comes to the Jedi and their way of doing things, strategizing, taking time when the decision is pretty clear, but everything is very, very structured, hierarchical, and I don't think he appreciates that when there's danger or when something needs to get done. But I still think he has the utmost respect for it when there isn't. He just has his way of doing things. And you sort of see him start to push the boundaries with it. Yord is a character that is newly Jedi Knight. And I quite like the character. I mean, I want them to build on him. I think they've not built on him enough. But I think he's a cool character. I think he's got a point to prove, really wanting to showcase his abilities and the fact that he was given Jedi Knight ranking off of merit, and there's no question about it. When we're thinking about actions driving the story forward, I think it's really interesting to see that something or an event has happened in the past and we have come into the story and we're going to find out what has happened and what is going to transpire as we move through the episodes, because we've got, on one hand, we've got this new Sith Lord, but then on the other, something has happened that we need to know about that have set the course of events to take place. So it's quite an interesting dynamic. The difference here is that the characters are making decisions that are affecting the story, mainly May at this point, but also decisions have already been made that have set everything in motion. And from those events now taking place, we're seeing the repercussions of what had happened in the past, the consequences that are now starting to transpire. But if I was to scale it down to the main characters that are driving the story forward, it has to be Sol, May and Osha. For the character evaluation section, we're going to give this score 6 out of 10 for the binge watching score. Now let's highlight any standout performances and character arcs. Who really shines in these first 2 episodes? Now, the ones to watch for me, easy. 4. May, Osha, Jedi Master Sol, and even though we don't know enough about him yet, but definitely the Sith Lord. The one to watch out of the ones to watch, I would have to say May. She's very driven, she's cunning in the fact that she is set on her objectives, and she has really hit the ground running. And she's got a different angle, the Acolyte angle, of how she's approaching her objectives, which are to hunt the Sith. It's not the traditional way that we usually see with, lightsaber fights. It's a very interesting way that she's approaching it. And the guidance that she's getting from her master, the Sith Lord, I will love to know how and why that advice has been given. Now, my predictions. Osha is going to resume her training, take that step into becoming a Jedi, and then integrate into the final battle, because there's always a finale of a lightsaber battle. My prediction with Sol is that he's going to start to be humbled more as we move further into the episodes. He's going to be shocked in the next episode, I think, when he has time to process what he's found out. I also think he's going to become progressively frustrated at the Jedi and take a similar stance to that which we've seen before with Qui-Gon Jinn. And finally, I had a long think about this. With the Sith Lord, my prediction is this. I think it's someone directly involved with what has happened in the past that has led to this that we're seeing now, the hunting of the Jedi and specific Jedi For the standout performance and arc section, Binge Watcher is going to rate this 6 out of 10. Finally, here's my overall opinion on the character development in The Acolyte, episode 1 and 2. Do the characters add depth and intrigue to the series? So my first point on this is yes, the characters do. And I think they've been teed up very nicely. They haven't been overly introduced and given too much, and they haven't given too little. So it's quite a nice balance that's been struck. There's definitely questions, 100%, but it's the first 2 episodes, right? So I would think, or would like to think, that we're going to learn all of these things as we go through, and it'll be interesting to see the development, how they evolve, how they grow positively and negatively, but it's a matter of time. But I do really hope that they get this right. This is their opportunity, Disney, to get this right. My second point would be that I really like the threads to the future of Star Wars. In our case, the threads of the past. I really like the threads that resemble Anakin and Obi-Wan with May and Osha. I think it's really, really cool. They've done it in a subtle way. Everything about the threads to the future and what we've seen in the past of Star Wars are nice little subtle threads into what we've seen. And that's really cool because it's going to take place and have a knock-on effect and link into that future, the Phantom Menace, the Clone Wars, Revenge of the Sith, and so on. And it gives you that sense of feeling we've been here before. Now, the only caveat I would say is I really want them to build on the other characters, the other main-ish characters, like Yord, Jackie, and Jedi Master Venestra. So the overall score of the character development in this second criteria is 15 out of 25. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. Make sure you smash a like if you enjoyed, and subscribe if you're new to the channel. With our main players introduced, let's shift our focus to the visual and special effects. How does the Acolyte stack up in terms of its video production quality? Now, there are 3 main aspects that I want to drill in on, and those aspects that I really liked. One is the lightsabers. They've finally fixed it. The problem is there's not enough of it. So in the very opening scene, you see a lightsaber being used. Now you see lightsabers come into it, but not enough to what you would associate Star Wars with. Now, in the Kenobi series, they got it completely wrong with the lightsabers. In the High Republic era, in the Acolyte, they've fixed it. They've listened to the fans. And they've also introduced new hilts, the handle of the lightsaber, which you'd like to think that they would have done that anyway, of course, but it's a nice touch. The second has to be the costumes. Now, the massive standout for me is the Jedi robes. So you've got 2 versions. So what you would see in the Star Wars that you know and love, which is the brown robes, but in this one you have 2 sets. You have when they're in the Jedi Temple, sort of very, very white and light robes, but when they're on a mission, they switch to their sort of, I don't know if you'd call it adventure robes or mission robes, which are what you know, which are brown, that you associate with in the Star Wars that you've all seen, known and loved. And the final point that I was expecting, but I really do like, is the introduction of new alien races. And I think that they've definitely got the visual effects right. Think of the Phantom Menace and we see Jar Jar Binks. It was so obvious that he was CGI'd. Whereas in this, they've maintained their level of consistency when investing into the quality of the technology to produce the right alien race characters that is not obvious to us that it's CGI'd. For that, this section, the visual appeal section, the binge watching score is 5 out of 5. Now let's talk about cinematography and the special effects. How does the camera work and CGI enhance the viewing experience? Now there's a few points here. The main one for me, the locations that they've introduced already into the series. 2 episodes. I mean, episode 1 in itself had 4 new planets introduced. Yuda, Coruscant, Karlak, and there's an unknown planet that the Sith Lord is hiding on. In episode 2, you get another 2 planets, Alega and Kufar. I'm sure I've butchered the names, but you've got 6 planets that have been introduced in 2 episodes. and it's not forced, naturally threaded in to the series, which is really nice. Another point on that though that I really found quite cool was that they've not just introduced the planets, they've introduced the planets with their own look and feel. So Yuda is a mountain type planet. Coruscant, that we know, is a city planet. Karlak is ice planet. The unknown planet that the Sith's hiding on is rock and sea with dark settings and elements to it. Alega being rock and sea type planet, and then Kufar is just complete jungle. Now the thing that they've kept very consistent is the look and feel to each scene. So when you're looking at the Sith and the Sith apprentice, you're seeing the mood shift from what we would see from the Jedi realms, and mood being light and soft sort of elements to it. And you've also got the obvious one, which is if you're a Sith, you're carrying a red lightsaber and you're using a red lightsaber, whereas the light side of the Force, you're using blue and green as standard, but then you've got yellow that's already been introduced, and we haven't yet seen it, but purple. Now the last really, really cool point is the fight scenes. Now, hands down, it is lacking with lightsaber battles. However, the lightsaber battles aside, if you look at those fight scenes, it's very Matrix-esque in terms of the body movement, and it's real emphasis on giving a new, fresh look at how they would have fought back then, because they're very in their element with being religious, like an emphasis on the religious beliefs surrounding the Jedi. And that's sort of shown because we're in now a time and an era where the Jedi are in their quantities and the religion is at its peak. So everything is very hierarchical and everything about them and their beliefs is so enhanced in this era. So it's coming out in their fight styles, their mannerisms, how they operate generally. So it's really cool to see. So Binge Watcher is going to score the cinematography and special effects section 7 out of 10. Now let's highlight any memorable moments. Are there any standout scenes or moments that leave us with a lasting impression? Now the first one here for me is the exchange between Jedi Master Soul and Yord. Now this is going to be a little bit of a spoiler, so you might want to skip. But the exchange is really interesting and it really, really hit home for me. I thought it was very clever. Again, it's linked to the other Jedi movies and TV series. The specific line that is used in this situation is to not let fear cloud your judgment. Now couple that with the lighting and the music, and for me, if you fast forward now, that is one of the main reasons for the downfall of the Jedi. And the mistake here is not fear, it's suspicion. And I think there's a big differentiator between the two, because arguably the Jedi aren't suspicious enough of those around them that are Sith. I mean, we had years of Palpatine hiding in plain sight. Now yes, the dark side was very powerful and the Jedi couldn't see through it, but at the end of the day, logic suggests that the guy has been in power for way too long. And if they were quicker with latching on and putting two and two together, they might have caught on sooner and potentially saved themselves. Now, the next point on this is the locations that were introduced. Real emphasis on differentiation between the worlds, and I really like that. I really like that they do it in a very subtle way. They introduce the different types of look and feels and the atmosphere to those planets, and they do it in a very subtle way. But on the flip side of this, I would say that there's not enough. And the honest truth right now is that there isn't really enough yet. And I know it's the first 2 episodes, but I'm literally sitting here really trying to think about what the main standout parts are. Now there is standout parts, I've just mentioned some, but I think they could have done a bit more. But I think maybe that's probably what they're waiting for with the episodes that are still to come. But that's why it's very, very dangerous if they don't. For Binge Watcher, the memorable visual section is going to score a 6 out of 10. Finally, here are my overall thoughts on the visual and cinematography in The Acolyte. Do these elements contribute to making the series a visually compelling experience? Now, I'm on the fence with this. There's a lot of thought and execution that they've put into this, but there's a lot more that they need to do. Now, like I said before, I know it's the first 2 episodes, but they've got a lot to make up for, and they need to make sure that they deliver the rest of the episodes, because right now we're seeing a bit of a divide. I'm going to come to that later on in this episode, but they really need to get it right. Like I said, not enough for me. I want to see more saber battles. I think lightsabers is, well, the main thing that everyone associates Star Wars to, and that really needs to happen. They need to bring that into this. You've seen lightsabers in drips and drabs in the first 2 episodes, but we're not really seeing enough of it. But what I am impressed with is the number of planets and worlds that they've introduced already in the first 2 episodes. The visuals and the cinematography is brilliant to see. I also think the differentiation between the moods is not obvious, but it's a good touch. You know, when it's a dark side setting, it's in line with that scene very, very nicely, organically, not forced. I think in the latest trilogy, in The Force Awakens, it was a little bit forced and obvious, whereas this is a nice subtle thing. And I think over the course of the series, because if I really pick apart and make a prediction into the trailer that we've seen, I think those scenes will start following in parallel. So the darker the story starts to get, the darker the scenes. So it's very organic in its layout. I think lightsabers, from what we've seen, they have fixed it so far. But the icing on the cake for me will be in the battle scenes to see, have they fixed it all the way through, so that it's the impressive dueling through movement and the visuals that we know and love from the George Lucas days? Or is it another, they look good, but the battle scenes are like what we see in the Kenobi series? And the costumes as well. The costumes have been brilliantly delivered. I think they've done a good job. I mean, the Jedi robes, going from Temple, where it's a different outfit and uniform, as opposed to when they're on a mission, I really, really think it's great. They've done a real good job with that. And my last point on this is that I think the fighting, there's no lightsaber fights, but their movement when they are faced with having to react to a fight, their movement is like the Matrix. It's insane. So they've really put emphasis and differentiation into this era in terms of how those Jedi fight, and it is really, really good. So the overall visual and cinematography section is going to get a binge watching score of 18 out of 25. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section. Make sure to smash a like if you enjoyed and subscribe to the channel if you're new. Let's shift our focus to the entertainment value of The Acolyte. How enjoyable is the series overall? And does it keep you engaged from start to finish? Honest answer here, I think yes. I do think it does. It's a new era that we've been waiting for. Star Wars fans have been wanting this for a while. I certainly have been wanting them to go as far back as this, to look at the High Republic in a time where the Jedi are in their quantities, the religion is at its peak, peace is enforced, and we're going to start seeing the Sith come into play. There's a good plot. They have something that they can build on very nicely. I like the elements to the plot, and it's going to gradually and organically develop as we move further into the series. I also do think that with the plot, the thing that they've got very right about it is it's not forced. It's happening very patiently. And I think they've got that really right. And when it builds over the course of the series, it will really, really nail down and come to fruition in the right way. My next point here is that it does strike a balance between scenes. So it doesn't move too quickly through scenes, but it doesn't move too slow through scenes. And they don't leave any lingering questions without making sure that they bring it back, and it's really good to see that. And they have done it, or tried to make sure that they do it within the actual episode itself. So they can play that game, but they are making sure that they keep the audience with them on the journey. And that's something that I think is very powerful of them to have done. They're making sure that they are thinking of the audience, keeping them with them every step of the way as we move through the series. The character builds. So if I think of Fallout, there was a lot that went into making sure that there was a specific fact file in the first episode that was built, and the character grew within that section, or sequence rather, of the series. In this, they've not under-delivered, but they've not over-delivered. And I think they've struck a balance in patience in building out the fundamentals around those character profiles, which is really good. And again, it's that balance, right? It's the balance of making sure that they've not given too much away, but they've given just the right amount, and they're giving little breadcrumbs along the way to spark thought and questions as to what you think could happen or might happen, and the paths that the next episodes could take. And the final point here is definitely going to be the visual and cinematography elements, 100%. They've brought and put a lot of effort into, like what we mentioned before, right? The costumes, touch wood, they continue with the lightsabers, the different alien races that they've brought into this, the scene settings within the multitude of planets that they've already introduced in 2 45-minute episodes. They've really done a good job, but they need to continue it. And the big moment of truth for me is all in the lightsaber battles, and not just how they look and feel, but the number of those battles that are going to take place. Are they going to follow suit and strike a balance as they have done with the battles that they're going to have? Or are they going to just leave it until the end and keep us all waiting and longing for something? Because remember, they've already done 2 episodes now. There's 8 that are going to be released, so that's 6 left. So let's hope that they do bring those saber battles in. I mean, if there's none in episode 3, that's only 5 episodes left. So I'm hopeful. Now for the entertainment factor section, Binge Watcher is going to score this a 4 out of 5. Now let's compare the Acolyte to similar content. But what we're going to do is look at within the Star Wars universe. How does it stack up against its peers? I had to really think about this. I definitely think it's definitely better than the Kenobi series already, like hands down. And I would also say that any Star Wars content that is made, movie or TV series, crushes the Force Awakens trilogy. But its overall ranking is too soon to tell. But right now, it's definitely above the Force Awakens. It, for me, is above Kenobi. And I think I'll get more of a grasp once more episodes start to come out. But it is really good. The one thing I'm not going to do is it's not getting anywhere near The Mandalorian. For me, The Mandalorian was hands down one of the best Star Wars series to come out of Disney. Now, saying that, I think they've done a really good job in teasing the audience so far. But saber battles need to come back into the fold. They have to introduce those saber battles in episode 3. Big moment for Star Wars right now. So for the comparison to similar content section, Binge Watcher is going to score this a 3 out of 5. Next, let's highlight any standout moments in the Acolyte. Are there any scenes or sequences that elevate the entertainment and leave a lasting impression? I had to really think about this one. Now, there is. I think I've highlighted 5 that I could say. And the first one would be the Jedi Master Soul and Yord exchange. That line on not giving in to fear is very powerful as it threads to the future. The second is the tense standoff between May and Osha, and that rebalancing factor between light and dark, good, evil, as a switch and then switch back sort of element. The third would be the 6 new worlds that have been introduced, other than Coruscant, but we're already in the realms of 6 planets that we've been brought into, and we're only in 2 episodes. The fourth is the opening scene, I think. That really was quite powerful with Jedi Master and Dara, and getting to see the lightsabers back in action, not in a battle sequence, just seeing it. And so far, like I've said, it's making up for the Kenobi series with what they did with the lightsabers, but we'll need to see the battle scenes. The fifth, for me, hands down, has to be the fighting. Like how the Jedi's movements and patterns are very similar to like the Matrix, but it really resembles and puts emphasis on that era of Star Wars in the High Republic, and the religion being at its all-time high with being very textbook, and their movements in comparison to when we go and look at the Phantom Menace, Clone Wars and the Sith and so on, is very different. The interesting thing about that is how the religion has evolved, and it shows that. Now, besides that, I just don't think there's enough yet. I think that they can do better. Now, I understand what they've done here. They're slowly sort of bringing you into things, and look, I get it, it's the first 2 episodes, they've done a good job. I do think they need to bring the next level in episodes 3 and so on, because that will let it down and it will be the deciding factor as to whether or not this is a success or it's a disaster. But so far, I think it's been great. I just think they need to give a little bit more for the Star Wars that we know, elements that we sort of resonate with. And they've done that in pockets. I've listed quite a few here, but I think they need to take that next level now. A lot riding on episode 3. Now notice that I haven't mentioned in any of the highlight scenes anything to do with lightsaber battles. There are battle scenes with, like I've said, the movements of the Jedi, very Matrix-esque, but no real battles with lightsabers. And I mean, come on, that is, again, I know it's episode 1 and 2, we've still got a lot more, but, we need to start seeing that now. A lot, like I said, a lot is riding on this episode 3. So for the standout moment section, Binge Watcher is going to rate this 3 out of 5. Let's also consider now the rewatchability and recommendation factor. Would I revisit The Acolyte and would I recommend it to others? Honest opinion, I would watch it again and I would recommend it to others. The reasons for that are because I think that they have a good plot and I think they've approached this slightly differently to what they might have done for Kenobi, in being a bit too cliche, and they've clearly put a lot of effort into this, and that you're seeing through the plot. First 2 episodes for me have been very good plot building, and I want to see more. I'm excited to see episode 3. The characters have been introduced in a very nice way. I think they've been very subtle and patient about how they bring their audience along with them across the first 2 episodes. They've done it in a way that sort of, it's not giving you too little, but it's not giving you too much. And they're leaving those breadcrumbs to really bring an excitement feel to this new series. They've given us something that's fresh and new to the Star Wars that we know and love. But they've also done it in a very subtle way where they're bringing elements of what we've seen from other movies and TV series of Star Wars, which brings a bit of a familiarity to it, and it makes that connection back into Star Wars. And especially when we're looking into a new era of Star Wars, it's vitally important, and I think they've got that very right. Now, the slight caveat to this is that there's not enough fight scenes, and there's definitely not enough, if any, lightsaber scenes. So I think that's something that they really need to address in episode 3, as we've already discussed. And I'm hoping and looking forward to hopefully being right in my prediction that there will be in episode 3. And if there isn't, then it's going to be hit and miss if it's not in episode 4. I think there will be, and I think there should be. And my final point is that if this stays on the trajectory that it's on, and stays consistent, I would say that this is a binge-worthy series. For the rewatchability and recommendation section, Binge Watcher is going to score this 8 out of 10. Here's my overall opinion on the entertainment value of The Acolyte. Does it deliver on its promise of being an enjoyable and engaging addition to the Star Wars universe? As a one-liner, they've made a start. So far, they've laid out their stall and they've made an impact. They've set the foundations in place to build from, and build from very nicely. They've introduced the new era that we haven't seen before. They've given us the starting point of what the Jedi was like in that era of the High Republic. They've built a nice plot around the hunt for specific masters within the Jedi. And the characters have been balanced with how much we're allowed to know, and the viewing experience has been great. We've seen more costumes, we've seen differentiator in those costumes, we've seen new locations already in 2 episodes, but the piece that remains is that wow factor for the audience. Now, the rest of the episodes in this series, they need to have that. They need to have that draw-dropping element into it. The overall scoring tallying up for this entertainment value section is going to be 18 out of 25. But let me know your thoughts in the comments. Smash a like if you enjoyed and subscribe to the channel if you're new. Now that we've gone through all the criteria to really dive in deep to the review and the analysis around these first 2 episodes, let's go into the section on the tally. Should it be on your binge watch list? So on the binge watching scale of Flopbusters, 50/50s and Blockbusters, out of 100, when we tally all of the scores up, it comes out to 68 out of 100. I think that's pretty good for the first 2 episodes. But let me know your thoughts down in the comments. Do you agree? Do you disagree? I want to hear from you. Next, let's see what the review sites are saying. How do their rankings and reviews contribute to the overall perception of The Acolyte? Now, first up we have IMDb. The Acolyte here has got a scoring of 4.6 out of 10, and the popularity is going up. It's an upward trend. And if we look at the first 2 episodes, episode 1 they're giving 6.1 out of 10, and episode 2 they're giving a 6 out of 10. Next we have IndieWire, and you can see here that they've given a scoring, or a grading rather, of B. Next we have Empire, and they've given a score of 3 out of 5. Next we have Metacritic. Now this is where it gets interesting, right? So we've got Metacritic and Rotten Tomatoes is where you can see that critics versus user score. Now Metacritic, the critic score is at 67%. So Binge Watcher's review of it, overall scoring, is pretty bang on with Metacritic. But interestingly, the user score is 3.3. Now, when I was doing my research, I could definitely see that the users, the fan base, was somewhat critical of this, but it's really interesting to see the differentiation here. And if we look at Rotten Tomatoes, it gets like practically the same. 91% from the critics, and the audience 31%. When I looked at this a couple of days ago, it was the critics was at 94%, and then the audience was at 33%. They've both shown a downward trend, but it's interesting how different they are. The critics are saying one thing, but the audience is completely saying something different. Now, moving on to what the audience is saying, let's take a deeper dive into that. So we can see here from the reviews of the audience, 2.6 out of 5. 537 people have rated, and the majority have rated it a 1. That is insane. So there's clearly out of touch behaviour going on here. As we wrap up the tally, it's time to look ahead. Make sure you tune in next week as we set our sights on episode 3 of the Star Wars Acolyte series. Make sure to smash a like if you enjoy, and subscribe to the channel if you're new. Follow us on all our social media platforms to stay up to date with the latest content. The link's in the bio. See you next time.